putting drummers in there really until we got him back, because he is the real sound with the rest of the guys. It's the real deal, you know.
Malcolm Young, AC/DC's rhythm guitarist, was more than only the basis for the band. He was the driving force for their enduring sound. An iconic rock star. Malcolm's tale is not just about music, the boisterous crowds and his guitar prowess, but let's take a look at his life. Exploring his life and learning about his origins, difficulties and the long-term effects he left behind. Malcolm, Let's Rock. Young was a legendary figure in Australian music. Was the backing rhythm guitarist, singer and one of the original members of the AC/DC, a hard rock band. Aside from a brief, he was a member of AC/DC until 1988. From the beginning till the retirement for health issues. From the beginning, Malcolm had a distinct idea for their music. To be boisterous, strong, and vivacious. It wasn't he who performed outrageous solos or appearing on stage in school uniforms, but Malcolm served as the band's pillar. The continuous guitar playing gave AC/DC its strong sound. He was compared by fans to the A fast car's engine makes everything run smoothly. Malcolm put a lot of effort into his writing songs and directing the band's course during their live performance. His piercing chords and a constant beat gave the song a sense of powerful and unstoppable. Over time, AC/DC rose to prominence as one of the best rock all-time bands, with singles like Highway Black to Hell and Back. Despite his brother and bandmate Angus was frequently those who were familiar with AC/DC were highlighted. Realized Malcolm was the quiet leader. He ensured that the band remained loyal to its essence and tone. In 2003, The Rock was introduced to AC/DC, and rolling into the Hall of Fame, it was an honor. In honor of the brothers who had constructed something amazing together. In 2014, Malcolm had to quit the group due to his health. He suffered from dementia, a condition that gradually eliminates the ability to think and remember. Even after resigning, Malcolm provided his approval for the band to continue. Although AC/DC persisted, it was never fully the same without him. Notwithstanding, Malcolm moved out of the spotlight for good. He made a lasting impression on the field. A rock and roll titan was lost, but his music endures whenever a song from AC/DC blares through a speaker. Can hear Malcolm driving with a steady rhythm, moving the music along like he always did. What function did his early years serve? Malcolm Mitchell, the man he became. Young was born on January 6, Glasgow, Scotland. In 1953 he was up in a large, diligent family. His father William Young held a variety of positions. Worked in a rope business that was run by equipment and even participated in World War II. As a technician for flight engines. Following that, he served as a builder's assistant throughout the war and subsequently became Malcolm's mother and a postman. Margaret remained at home to look for Glasgow. Family life wasn't easy. However, the Youngs were resilient and steadfast. And Malcolm in 1963, when Malcolm was only when I was old, something occurred that altered their lives irrevocably. That winter was among Scotland's coldest. Snow accumulated up to 8 feet in the past. And things got even more difficult around that when a television commercial aired giving families in Scotland the opportunity to relocate to Australia in order to start over. Notion of milder temperatures and improved the opportunities were too good to ignore. That year, in late June, 15 members of the Young family prepared their belongings and left. Departing for Australia. Keep in mind that Malcolm was only 10 years old, and he was accompanied by his older brother, Angus, and his younger brother. Their oldest brother is George. Margaret, their only sibling, Stephen, and William Jr., another sibling, also made the journey. John and Alex, 2 further brothers. John had already moved, so they didn't join them. Alex stayed after traveling to Australia earlier to pursue his passion in Europe. He later became a member of a band named Grapefruit. Upon the arrival of the new family in Australia, everything seemed novel and the sky was warm, and the weather was strange. Was radiant, and life appeared to be full of Malcolm and his siblings' potential adapted to their new residence and gradually adjusted to the lifestyle of Australia despite having little. They each had Malcolm grew up with music and other people. His brother George is surrounded by music. Become a well-known performer with the Easy Beats, a band that inspired Angus and Malcolm will retrieve guitars from their own, they practiced for hours. Dreaming of strumming chords and forming a band of their own, that dream did realized with the formation of Malcolm and Angus. The band acdc later became one of the best rock bands ever. However, it all began with a young guy from Glasgow, who relocated halfway across the world while pursuing a better life with his family. Life being raised in a household where music was everywhere and no longer merely a pastime, it was an inherited custom. Malcolm, from one sibling to the next, once clarified that every man and his oldest son played music with his small family. After that, brother Stevie performed the accordion. The first ones were John and Alex. To learn how to play the guitar as the younger brothers listened to the music and watched. It went naturally to George and then to Malcolm, followed by the youngest. When the young family got there, Angus, Australia had very little of their own. The first residence was at the Villawood Migrant Centre. Hostel, it wasn't a real home. Lived in tiny shelters made of bent metal. Known as Neeson cottages, these simple cottages and small, providing little seclusion or comfort. Although life at Villawood was difficult, additionally, that's where things started to shift. George, who was older than the young Angus and Malcolm, became friends at the additionally, the Harry Vanda Harry hostel. Was like George, he was a migrant with a deep passion for music. The two clicked right away. Playing the guitar for hours on end and wishing to form a band. This later, friendship would grow into an extremely crucial not only for George but also for, after a while, the entire young family. After leaving the hostel, the Youngs, it wasn't a semi-detached property. Elegant, but it was an improvement over the huts. At Villawood, the home turned into a teeming with music. Guitars were constantly lying around, and there was always someone in the evenings. George would impart his knowledge to Angus and Malcolm. Malcolm was immediately enamored with the guitar. He cherished the sensation in his hands and the loud noise it produced as he played the strings. He continuously learned the craft of the constant driving sound of a rhythm guitar that would eventually make acdc well known. There was always music in the young home. Flowed from the tiny Burwood home, bringing rock to the neighborhood, and Angus and Malcolm would jam for a roll. Hours that were influenced by their elder brothers. A band was created by George and Harry Vanda, known as the Easy Beats, and they became into enormous in Australia. Viewing George's Malcolm and Angus dreamed of success. Malcolm's love of music is even greater, becoming more powerful every day, yet he wasn't interested in showing off or being ostentatious. He and his beloved were alone. Malcolm's experience with music wasn't merely, it was about family struggles and music, effort and the guts to begin over. But what was the previous trajectory of his career? One of the biggest rock bands was acdc. Worldwide bands. Malcolm Young's The Musical Excursion featured some intriguing pauses during the journey. In the early 19Angus, Malcolm's younger brother joined the Marcus Hook, a band. This was no ordinary roll band. Was a project their older brother was in charge of. George Young and Harry, his musical collaborator. Harry and Vanda. George were already prosperous musicians renowned for their collaborate with Easy Beats, and they desired to try out a few different sounds. The Marcus Hook roll band was never supposed to be a significant, long-term undertaking. It was more similar to a lively jam session amongst gifted rock and roll-loving musicians. They created the Tales of Old album. Grandaddy, which was only made available in the album, didn't do well in Australia. Sounds at the moment, but it turned into renown in the future since it was among the initial performances by Malcolm and Angus collaborating on a record at around the same. Malcolm also participated in other musical endeavors. He performed on the song "Evie" by Stevie Wright. Stevie used to be the lead vocalist for the song was composed with Easy Beats and George Young, and Harry Vanda produced it. Evie was not your typical song, it was 11 minutes long, with 3 separate. Malcolm played the scorching guitar at certain moments. Part 1 solo, displaying his unadulterated capacity and aptitude for making a guitar sing. Malcolm even participated in a brief The Velvet Underground as a band, but not lose well-known American band Reed. This local organization was situated in it didn't stay long in Newcastle, Australia. But each encounter enhanced Malcolm's musical abilities. By 1973, Malcolm was 20 years old and eager to begin something new. Years old, bursting with creativity, and prepared to form a band with strength, vitality, and with a unique tone, he turned to his Angus Young, a younger sibling who was only at the age of 18. Malcolm assumed the position of Angus, played lead guitar, and he played rhythm. They introduced Colin Burgess on guitar, Larry Van Cite on bass, and Dave on drums. Evans as the vocalist. They now required a name. They came across the letters one day. ACDC on their sister's back. The letter and Margaret's sewing machine stood for direct alternating current. Current is a term used to describe electricity, although it had significance for the Young brothers. Otherwise, it felt strong, energetic, and ideal for the unadulterated intensity of the band, and like that, ACDC came into being. Can I Sit Next was the name of the first single. It was appealing to you girl and full of attitude, but they later recorded it again. Featuring Bon Scott, a new singer, and that rendition became renowned by after ACDC relocated to Melbourne in 1975. Things truly began to remove the bands. The sound was developing loudly and fully. Malcolm's steady rhythm guitar exudes fire. Established a solid bass while Angus above it, wild solos flew. They were Malcolm's unstoppable path to AC/DC wasn't immediate. It was developed over years of with family, learning, playing, and jamming and companions. Every recording, every band, and each instruction molded him into the powerhouse in rock and roll that would shortly eternally alter music. AC/DC was more than it was the sound of a band. Electricity created by two people siblings who never gave up pursuing the ideal riff. In 1977, AC/DC was beginning to gain recognition. For both themselves, and their music was gaining popularity in Europe that year. The opportunity to tour with the Black Sabbath, a legendary band, was a significant event in Malcolm Young's Angus, brother, and the rest of AC/DC. Going on tour with such a well-known band means they were on the verge of becoming rock stars. Things weren't always easy on the road. While Black and Bon Scott of AC/DC, Ozzy Osbourne, the frontman for Sabbath, was amazing. Often quickly became friends, but not all got along so well that one evening everything became tension between Black and Malcolm. Malcolm, the Geyser butler of Sabbath's foundation, subsequently asserted that Geyser had drawn a knife on him during a furious dispute. Geyser denied that it ever occurred, but the narrative turned into one of those crazy rock and roll stories that are still discussed today. Another significant change occurred that year. Mark Evans, the bassist of AC/DC, departed. He said that conflicts with the band Malcolm and Angus were instrumental in his departure. Identifying the appropriate band chemistry is difficult and personalities might collide at times. Cliff Evans had to be replaced by Williams, supplying a strong bottom tone that was beneficial. Anchor the music of AC/DC. As the band's notoriety increased, so did the demands of daily life on the road. Malcolm was the band's main figure. However, he was also dealing with personal difficulties. In 1988, when AC/DC was their world tour, Blow Up Your Video, Malcolm needed to move aside since alcohol had been an issue, and he was aware that he needed choosing to get assistance wasn't simple. However, it was essential while Malcolm committed to helping the band get sober. Went on with a well-known face his Stevie Young, his nephew, covered for him on tour. Malcolm battled valiantly for his life. Back on course following his battle with his demons, he went back to acdc more powerful and more concentrated than before. He remained with the playing rhythm guitar in a band for decades. With the same ferocity and accuracy as had described the sound of acdc from the starting in 1973 and ending with his final death in 2013, Malcolm went on a global tour. 37 years of very constant use. Night after he appeared on stage, night after night in city after city, setting the riffs that drove the greatest songs of acdc. Even when he wasn't, Malcolm took center stage as the band's steady hand, the silent boss who maintained Malcolm's health will soon be on track. Started to deteriorate, and dementia was taking its toll, and he created the devastating choice to leave the band because excellent Stevie Young filled in once more to replace him while retaining the youth, keeping the family's heritage alive. But even when Malcolm's music was still playing when acdc, working on the rumors for their album Power Up, revealed that they were playing guitar recordings that Malcolm had previously recorded as 2003, it seemed as though his soul was still there, leading his band. Contributed to the construction of his life after departing from Malcolm Young's acdc. The last few years were challenging, but they demonstrated their strength, and he loved his family, his music, and acdc. His health issues started very subtly, concealed beneath the band's thunderous, the dazzling lights and guitars of the stage. Following the enormous realm of black ice, Malcolm received some alarming news. He was found to have lung cancer. Fortunately, the Malcolm doctors discovered it early, had surgery to get rid of the cancer, and the course of treatment was successful. Lived through the battle, but his health wasn't what it was previously. In addition to that, Malcolm had a cardiac condition as well. Doctors, his heart beat steadily. Placed a little gadget known as a pacemaker. Notwithstanding these medical conditions, Malcolm stayed silent and strong about his difficulties and his desire to be the focal point of his attention. The most important thing was always the music. Malcolm's situation worsened. Extremely sick and unable to play like he did before leaving the band. But the lead of acdc's Brian Johnson, the singer, promised everyone right away that he clarified that the band wasn't finished yet, that they still intended to obtain jamming together in May 2014 in Vancouver, but by the time Malcolm was around when the recording sessions began. Stevie, his nephew, was present instead. Young took over as a rhythm guitar player. As time went on, it became clear that Malcolm was not going to return. The management released a formal statement verifying that he has retired from acdc. It was a challenging time, but the band promised supporters that they would keep up with Malcolm's assistance. Malcolm's well-being kept getting worse, and he died. The rock community lamented the loss in 2017 of a legend, but his songs endure. Driven by the booming acdc sound, the band he created using only his hands. The last years of Malcolm Young were characterized by through a challenging fight with dementia, an illness that gradually took away his recollections, but never his passion for music. Was a terrible period for his family, his fellow musicians and admirers worldwide. Interviews with Malcolm's younger Angus Young, the brother, disclosed that Malcolm had begun exhibiting signs of dementia even before to the recording of acdc Black Ice. During the Black, their album, Malcolm was already on the Ice World Tour. Undergoing therapy while continuing to perform, he displayed amazing determination to persevere through the night after dark, but Angus, it wasn't simple. Additionally shown how difficult Malcolm battled to remain on stage throughout those. Malcolm had to retrain over the last travels. Before each performance, he would listen to acdc songs, spend hours practicing the same song, riffs repeatedly in order to maintain he kept them in mind during the performance. Malcolm had no intention of giving up. Despite his health, Angus stated Malcolm continued to tour until he was unable to, even though dementia took his memory. It never required his enthusiasm or the Malcolm Young's legacy was greater. He was more than just a guitarist. Foundation of acdc, the consistent beat that kept the group together despite the when illness struck, his music persisted. Bringing to everyone's attention what real rock, and Malcolm's funeral seems to have been conducted in the year he passed away at St. Sidney's Mary's Cathedral, where family, friends and family came together to say farewell to a man who has influenced the rock music's enduring sound, even though he was no longer present with them in person. Malcolm's influence persisted throughout the music. He founded acdc with his brothers. Promised to keep performing in his honor. Malcolm may be gone from the world, but his songs and a rhythmic guitar would go on. To inspire future generations of rock and roll. What inspired him to write music, and what kind of legacy did he leave behind? Following the death of Malcolm Young, the artist was facing a blank wall in the city. Observing the vacant area, the artist was moved to commemorate Malcolm's memory, to produce something that would capture the man's essence for all time. Someone contributed to acdc's definition. The artist grabbed his brush and began. He imagined drawing a portrait of Malcolm. Malcolm's gaze and determined face concentrated, and the well-known picture of him. He knew how to play his guitar passionately. The spirit had to be captured in the portrait. Of Malcolm's compositions, the bluesy rock melodies that motivated millions of people, countless admirers worldwide. As he painted, the artist reflected on Malcolm's many people like his distinct style. Rock and roll from the 1950s and the 1960s, blues-based guitarists and the 70s. Malcolm had created his own style of performing that differs from many rock musicians who turned up their amplifiers and utilized a lot of distortion. Malcolm learned to perform open chords with Marshall amplifiers or turned down. This added a raw quality to his guitar sound. Strong beat without the typical heavy distortion. The artist considered the Malcolm has received numerous tributes over. In an interview conducted in 2004, Dave Malcolm had been named by Mustaine of Megadeth among the world's top rhythm guitarists, accompanied by Rudolf Schenker of the James Hetfield and the Scorpions of Metallica. These were among the most significant names from Mustaine, and in rock Malcolm was notable for his consistent, unwavering cadence. As the artwork appeared, the artist's thought came to life on the wall. Returning to a punk rock song from 2006 by the Frenzal Rum, an Australian band, titled Malcolm Young Forever. It was a song composed as a tribute to the legend and a means of recall Malcolm's influence on music. The artist had a strong bond with Same Tune as well as to the innumerable other supporters who were touched by Malcolm's music. While he completed the details, the street was turning into a painting. Busy, but nobody appeared to care. Pause to gaze at the colorful portrait. Some pause, while others take pictures. Pause to consider the painting wasn't merely an homage to a guitarist. Was an homage to the spirit and heart of the rhythm that carried throughout rock and roll acdc's songs over decades, and to a man who would go down in history as a rock icon. The performer took a step back to examine the wall that is now covered with the Malcolm Young's picture. His guitar held the music will always be in his hands with pride. Vibrant in the paintbrush strokes, the street had developed into a location for introspection, where supporters could congregate to recall the man who transformed rock. Gretsch Guitars in 2017, Music for All Time celebrated Malcolm Young with a unique reprinting of Gretsch. The guitar G6131MY is modeled after his famous This Guitar, Gretsch Jet Firebird, was a substantial portion of Malcolm's work as he has made significant changes to it over the years. It was dubbed the Beast, emblem of his distinct style and voice. Now with Malcolm's reissue, fans and acdc might own a fragment of history. Instrument that perfectly encapsulated his music on Malcolm's funeral day in November 2017, Some of the most well-known shared sincere sentiments in rock and metal. Eddie Van Halen tributes in his honor. Metallica's Ozzy Osbourne, Lars Ulrich and Meat Death's Dave Mustaine were a few of the celebrities who discussed Malcolm's significance to them. Both members of renowned bands such as Guns N' Roses, Paul Stanley of Kiss, Billy Idol, Joe Satriani, Def Leppard, Joe Walsh, and Anthrax's Scott Ian turned to social media or made remarks regarding the defeat. Even Alice Cooper, Muse, and Foo Fighters' Nikki Sixx and Vince Neil of the Mötley Crüe participated in the flood of tributes at amazing performances. Numerous artists decided to pay for a cover of an AC/DC song. The Foo pays homage to Malcolm's legacy. Among them were Fighters, Guns N' Roses. Those who featured songs by AC/DC in their set list, featuring unique performances to pay tribute to the rhythm guitarist who had formed rock and roll using his unique tone. The tributes weren't merely words, they were an observance of Malcolm's contribution to the realm of music and how it served as an inspiration for generations of his distinctive guitar is used by rock performers. His consistent rhythm and riffs were forever connected to the sound of AC/DC. But Malcolm wasn't. His music endured for a longer time with them in the affection of admirers and other musicians, resulting in a bittersweet death, a reminder of his significant influence on rock music. However, did he ever get any recognition? Throughout time, Malcolm Young and his Angus Young brother has been acknowledged numerous times for their amazing composing songs and making musical contributions, particularly through their involvement with AC/DC. Big Gun, a 1995 book by Angus and Malcolm Young, was the recipient of the most performed Australian work abroad. Demonstrated the popularity of their music worldwide. In 2001, their single, It's If You Want To, There Is a Long Way to the Top. Bon Scott Angus is the author of Rock and Roll, and Malcolm was listed among the top 10 at number 9. Australian songs will be played. Location for their well-known song Highway. In 2006, Hell received a nomination for Most Played. Australians who work abroad also. However, something occurred in 2007 and 2009. In fact, it received the 2009 award for the majority of Australians who play abroad. Additionally, Rock and Roll Train was penned by Malcolm Young and Angus took home the prize. For the majority of Australians who work abroad, the Young brothers were in the same year as additionally recognized as Songwriters of the Year in 2011's